Good day, everybody. This is Yin Yang with Morsels of a Thought number 1472 in California. And we are reading a book called The R Factor. It's a national bestseller. Discover the universal rhythms for leading prosperous relationships. The R Factor, Evolving Our Human Relationship Story by Ken Ashby and Maris Segal. Good morning, everybody. It is 5:10 in California, Pacific Standard Time, USA. So it is nighttime in Australia. It is afternoon or noon in Finland. I wanted to say hello to everybody, all the authors out there who know each other. Wonderful. I think it's wonderful. I want to join them. I want to become an author myself soon. Soon, soon, soon. You will find me probably under, I won't say. Anyway, my name is Yin Yang. So, uh, that is going to be my pen name for sure. Next day, now we were in the story where Mindy wound up in a hospital and she had a temporary blindness from the stress. And Rich has been looking for her. He turned to Google, searching her maiden name and married name to no avail. It occurred to him that maybe she had remarried. Oh, he's talking about somebody else, his mother. Okay, never mind. The next day, the threesome from the hospital picked up their father and brought him home. Not the hospital, the three siblings. The three siblings. The dad was in the hospital too. So the next day, the threesome picked up their father and brought him home. Terry Terry posted the dietary guidelines on the refrigerator and got busy making a grocery list so she could prepare healthy meals for their dad, while Tim sent an update to their families back in Arizona. It had been years since they'd all been under the same roof, let alone in the house they grew up in together, and it made Rich uncomfortable. He wasn't used to anyone else intruding on his time with his father, even if it was his siblings. And it showed. At one point, when they had been on each other's nerves too many times, Tim told Rich to stop being jealous. Then Terry said he was ungrateful. It was their father who put it to rest. Tim and Terry had left to pick up a prescription and a few groceries, and Rich voluntarily stayed behind with his father, who was sitting in his recliner. What a blessing it is to have all my kids here, he said. His dad said, I'm a lucky man. I guess so, but I don't think we need them anymore. You and I can do this, Rich replied. You never were one to accept help even when you were a boy, his dad said. Oh, no, you were always the one in charge. You wanted people to turn to you, not the other way around. Well, I was the oldest, Rich argued. That's one reason why I always worried most about you, son, his father confessed. You worried about me? Rich couldn't hide the confusion or surprise in his voice. Sure, I did. You took it upon yourself to watch the twins, get them off to school, check homework, and tell them what to do, and they accepted that. They even learned to turn to you when they needed something. You became a surrogate parent, and it's partly on me that I let you step into this role. With your mom's mental health issues, our life was messy. I didn't worry about Tim and Terry because I knew you were at the ready if they needed anything at all, even if I was not available due to work. You, on the other hand, didn't turn to anyone. Even with lots of friends, you were always the one in charge. I guess you didn't always have someone you felt like you could turn to, did you? Not true. I turned to you and I came out all right, Rich said. In some ways, yes, you did, his father said. What do you mean, in some ways? He asked. Well, your brother and sister were just 10 when your mom left suddenly, and I was overwhelmed with grief, fear, life, and buried myself in my work, his father began. With Rich's new knowledge about the note his mom had left, the mention of her caused him to twinge. He did not want to cause stress for his dad during this healing time. And it was only natural that they needed more care, so they learned how to accept and receive and trust. You helped them feel safe, Rich, and they learned how to be grateful because of it. They've told me many times how much they appreciate everything you did for them when they were kids, his dad said. This page won't cooperate. I'm trying to turn one page, not two. They did? Why didn't they tell me that? Asked Rich. I think they have said it, and I'm saying it now, yet you somehow can't hear it. I guess it's because you always felt responsible for their happiness and mine, so it just seemed to be part of your role. Your mom's departure was tough on all of us, but we never talked about it. We just moved on. It's a shame, really, because I can see that you're reluctant to accept support to this day, he said. I am not, Rich denied his father's words. Well, yes, you are. There are times you don't accept help or feedback from me. You're often defensive, and you can't deny that you're not being very good at accepting help from your sister and brother. Talk about resistance. And when it comes to your music, you have to admit that it's not easy for you to accept help or feedback with your songs either. Am I right? His father asked. Rich was happy to see that even though his dad's health had declined, he was as observant as ever. He didn't want to admit that he knew his dad was right, but he knew he couldn't deny it either. Yes, you're right. I can see it now, he said as his father's words made him think about his reaction to Mindy's feedback and others more recently. Rich, put your pride or whatever it is aside and empower them to help. Think of it this way. Their support will also give you more time for your songwriting. Besides, it'll improve your relationship with them significantly if you let it. When you let yourself appreciate people and express gratitude, it's the best thing you can do for a relationship. It's a connection that brings relationships to the next level, son. Humbled, Rich agreed. How many fathers this is Ying Yang. I asked, how many fathers can tell you that? These are remarkable people in this book. Humbled, Rich agreed. Even if I do accept their help and learn to appreciate it, it probably won't make a difference in our relationship. The damage is done, he said. Hogwash. All it takes is a little communication and a gratitude attitude to get everything going in the right direction, Rich. One of the best things you'll learn about gratitude is that it makes everything better. It turns criticism into feedback that you gladly accept and appreciate. I guess you can say it opens doors to a new perspective. What? Why? Rich asked. Because once you exercise gratitude in everything you do, you'll find that you get even more of the very things you are grateful for. As those things come rolling into your life, good things happen. Your relationship with yourself and your siblings improves. Your bank account increases. Your bank account increases. Your songs get better and get noticed. I get it, Dad. I get it, Dad. Rich laughed. I promise I'll try. Don't try it. Do it. When you say try, that gives you an out and shows you're not committed or leading with intention. Life's too short to go it alone. Collaboration is a gift that benefits all. You know that well from your music. Let your sister and brother be a part of your life and enjoy new growth. Like like Tim and Terry, most people have nothing but the best intentions. A little appreciation takes very little effort, but it has more impact on you and the people in your life than anything else ever will. And that's what having a gratitude attitude, capital G, capital A, can do, his father added. As Rich listened to his father's words, he realized how much he depended on his wisdom and advice, and just how close he'd come to losing it. No doubt Tim and Terry felt the same. Thank you, Dad. I needed to hear that. And he said before his voice broke, and what? And I'm grateful for every day with you. I hope that means I'll get many more, Rich finished as tears welled in his eyes. Me too, son, me too, his father replied before leaning back in his recliner. Now, I think I hear the garage door opening. Why don't you go help your brother and sister while I take a nap? You three have a lot to catch up on, I think. The next chapter is chapter 10 on acceptance. Acceptance. Accepting the unexpected expands our ability to shift. Now, I have to say something here because throughout my life, one of the things that I suffered from most was a feeling of a lack of acceptance. And it was when I was growing up in a different era. The different era is where being a non-mainstream American was kind of a detriment, a fault for having some kind of quality or characteristic that wasn't the men, tall, Caucasian, and rich and elderly. So even women and every other group of people, I'll say women of color, had trouble finding acceptance. And so, what this book is saying that from the other side, from the flip side of the coin, accepting the unexpected expands our ability to shift. And I believe that the entire society, good news is that in the 90s, I think our entire society shifted. So now it's important to me to identify myself as I'm born of Chinese origin. I'm an American Chinese person. And it's very important to me to be able to distinguish that from because I got lots of very rich values from my parents who were immigrants. And I'm an immigrant too, actually. So I'm first generation American. They were first generation American. My younger brother was born in America. And so he's a second generation American. I don't call immigrants zero. I don't say first generation being my younger brother. I say second generation. Anyway, that was just being here talking. Anyway, here back to the book. It wasn't easy for Mindy to accept her limitations. Years ago, before Rose was born, it was something she'd promised herself she would never do. She told herself that she'd never give someone else the power to control her life or threaten her well-being. She'd learned her lesson she had learned her lesson the hard way back when she was married to Rose's father, Shane. Theirs had been a whirlwind romance that had taken Mindy by surprise. For the first time, she'd let herself fall for someone, and she let her entire world revolve around him, to the point that the other relationships in her life began to suffer. What she had thought was love, however, turned into control. Her husband of 2 years was a sought after and very handsome session musician. He had increasingly become critical, demanding that she conform to his wishes. He said she spent too much time with her family and his. After all, she was married, and he was supposed to be the first priority in her life. In an attempt to appease and please him, her world increasingly shrank and revolved solely around him, to the point where she even shut out her friend Jamie and her parents. At the time, Mindy's work was getting increasingly noticed. Her attention to detail and her professionalism as a concert producer were highly commended. More than once, she was offered an opportunity for advancement. However, her husband frowned upon her taking on additional responsibilities. On several occasions, he'd told her that her job was to be his wife, and he was not willing to make any sacrifices for the sake of her career. Initially, Mindy was thrilled to be with someone who shared her love of music and was a notable in the music industry. She was also flattered that he loved her so much that he wanted her by his side all the time. He even showered her with gifts. He always said, I need you, which warmed her heart, made her feel special until his tone became angry, stifling, and overbearing. It was increasingly clear that they had not been in agreement about their expectations of each other and their marriage. She began to feel like she wanted more than to be someone's wife. She wanted more than a dead end job. When she expressed that to her husband, he voiced his anger and dug his heels in even deeper. Over time, it became a source of discontent between them, causing more than a few arguments that became increasingly heated. Whenever Mindy would ask that they talk things out, the opportunity would always be delayed by his work or her work or other have tos. There was a lot of avoidance going on, she thought. When therapy was raised as a possibility, her husband would say, maybe, and then he'd get angry when Mindy brought it up again. Mindy didn't feel like there was anyone she could talk to. Shane wouldn't talk to her, and on the occasions when she spoke with her parents, it was strained since she didn't feel safe to share the details of what was going on in her marriage. Then Mindy became pregnant, and she hoped that the news that they were starting a family would bring her and her husband together once again. Her husband had a different viewpoint, however. He became even more controlling, refusing to let her go places and demanding to know who she was talking to at all times. She was carrying his child after all. He even demanded that she quit her job, insisting that she give up her career and become a stay-at-home mom. No one needs you like me, and I want you at home and on my arm, he would scream. A once confident and independent woman, Mindy became compliant. Anything to keep the peace and avoid yet another argument, anything except resigning from her job. She didn't want to give up her job just yet anyway. She had worked too hard to get into the industry. She and her mentor had built a career path that she was committed to, and she found she enjoyed the challenges and excitement that her work brought into her life, not to mention the money that supported them whenever Shane's sessions slowed down for a month. Besides, it was a reprieve and a way to get away from the marriage that was becoming increasingly unhappy. At work, Mindy became withdrawn and disconnected from her coworkers for fear that they may find out. Rose's birth was a happy occasion. Mindy's and Shane's parents adored their granddaughter. Mindy loved every minute she spent with her while she was on maternity leave, and that made her husband happy as well. He liked having his wife at home all the time, at all times, where she was supposed to be. Quote, end quote. During lunch one day at their favorite spot, Mindy mentioned that they were fortunate that her parents were willing to babysit Rose when she returned to work. The mere mention of her going back to work triggered her husband's anger, and for the first time in their relationship, his behavior frightened Mindy. She walked on eggshells, hoping to steer the conversation toward safer topics, but it was her husband who brought up the subject again. It was her husband who brought the subject again. It was late at night when he'd come home from going out with his buddies after a session, and he walked into the bedroom, ready to pick a fight. She knew the signs and saw what was coming, but she was blindsided when he suddenly grabbed her by the arms, pulled her out of bed, and pushed her against the wall. As she fought back tears and tried to free herself from his grip, she was met with a harsh slap across the left side of her face. Helpless against his height and power, Mindy promised to quit her job. The next day, when her husband went to work, she searched for clarity and struggled with her love for him. But stronger still was the voice inside that wouldn't let her minimize what had happened. She knew in her gut that this was only the beginning of a harsh reality, that there was no way she would subject her child to that life. So she packed her bags, scooped up Rose, and in tears knocked on the door of her childhood home where safety was trusted. The next day, Mindy filed a police report and got a restraining order against her husband. After taking a few days of sick leave to allow the bruising to subside, she attempted to cover the evidence of his abuse with makeup and returned to work. Receiving silent stares and questions of concern, she offered no explanation. Simply saying she had taken a fall, Mindy offered no additional information and stepped into business as usual mode. She didn't even tell anyone when she filed for divorce. The nightmare continued for another 6 months as the police were called to her home and her office when her husband would show up demanding to see her. The final divorce decree ended their contact with each other. Mindy was in a constant state of sadness anger, and embarrassment for subjecting herself and those around her to Shane's dysfunction. She hardened from this experience and started a new job with a clean slate where her personal life wouldn't be the subject of whispered concern or pity among her coworkers. Mindy promised herself at that point that she would never let anyone have the power to control or hurt her again, and that she would stand in her strength forevermore. The temporary limitations from losing her eyesight and breaking her collarbone left Mindy feeling vulnerable for the first time since then. Losing her independence and control over her life was more than uncomfortable. At the same time, she was grateful that it was not permanent and able to recognize that the situation could be a turning point in her life. Her recovery was going well, and Mindy heeded the advice of both her doctors and parents and took a break from traveling for a couple months. However, she did go to the office a few times a week to work on the next series of concerts, a few times a week. This slower pace, being off the road and home with family for more than 10 days a month, offered Mindy time for rest and play, especially with Rose, and reflection, all things that seemed to be more of a commodity during the past years. Since she was restricted from driving, her father drove her to and from the office. While he was adamant about her not taking a car service, Mindy was increasingly apologetic for the inconvenience. On the drive to work one morning, Mindy and her dad were talking. I'm so grateful to you and Mom, and I wish I didn't have to impose on you anymore, Dad. You know how much I hate not being able to do what I need to do on my own, Mindy said. Oh, I know that well, Mindy, he replied. Dad, I've also learned that there are times when we get to accept the fact that there are things that are beyond our control, and I've found that we can always learn from them, she shared. Your hand's getting numb. I'm going to read one more paragraph. My hand's getting too numb. Exactly, her dad replied. It might do you some good to look at your circumstances differently. This is something you get to do, to heal inside and out. You owe that to yourself and to Rose. Take this as a sign that change in your life is inevitable. Excuse me. Okay, so next week we will continue with this story. And there is an SR code, a QR code. I don't know if you can read it, but here, try. Here. Try putting it on here. I don't know if my camera quality is high enough, but if you can try, the authors have a QR code for you. Let's see if I can get it in focus. At least you see the email address. I'm trying to get this in focus. It doesn't seem to be focused well, but if I can get it here and focused. Well, go to the R factor. Okay, there we go. You can see that. Okay, you can pause it if you need to. Alrighty, so I will see you tomorrow. This is Yin Yang hoping to inspire you to have a great day. I hope that this morsel of thought of wisdom will help you figure out the right things to do. We do the right things, and that is called virtue. So, in order to entertain you a little bit, I borrow people's wisdom and I try to get you morsels of a thought. 1472. Okay. All's Kinder